Matt Frei on LBC. Listen on your smart speaker now. Just say, play LBC.
Just say it. It's so easy. Play LBC. You're already playing LBC. You're already listening to it. Okay, Simon Marks is looking bright and breezy in Washington in front of the White House, as he always does. It's been a hell of a week, Simon. Let's start, first of all, just a brief reflection on the King Charles, that speech that had America, weeping with tears of joy at the resurrection of monarchy on the Republic's shores.
Yes, well, I mean, extraordinary scenes all week long as the four-day visit by the King and Queen took place here, Matt. I mean, I think a couple of the abiding images of the week were Republican politicians, people who absolutely do not back the idea of the country in any way returning to the governing arrangements that it threw off 250 years ago, falling over themselves to fawn at the King and Queen's side, particularly at the UK ambassador's garden party at the British Embassy when the visit got underway. Utterly extraordinary scenes. But I think also scenes that are worth reflecting upon are when the King and Queen travelled to New York, when they went to Front Royal, Virginia for a street party there, and they were engaging with the American people on a kind of a retail basis. It was notable how many people thanked the King for the speech that he made in Congress. One woman in New York was standing with a sign to kind of attract his attention that said, "Thank you so much for the speech you made to Congress." And numerous Americans, when they came face to face with the King, wanted to deliver one message to him, which was, we as a country really needed to hear that, because that speech was a rebuke. Very, very carefully articulated, an iron fist in a royal velvet glove, rebuking President Trump's authoritarianism on the floor of the House of Representatives, with lawmakers from both chambers and members of the president's cabinet present for the speech. And I think the fact that Americans themselves, in many instances, felt that this was kind of a pressure valve that had been released, even if it's not going to change any behaviour at the White House, and we can already tell that it isn't. In that sense, I think it had some value. It was
political medicine, bitter political medicine, delivered in a cup of china with Earl Grey tea mixed in. Very elegant and incredibly well handled. And I guess the Germans are thinking, I wish we had one of those, kings that we could deploy to smooth over the ruffled feathers, because that relationship between Chancellor Merz and Trump has gone south in a big way. And his announcement, which is apparently going to happen, of the withdrawal of 5,000 troops from Germany, which, as we heard from Katja Hoyer, would not be the first time this has been threatened, but it's now going ahead, is a direct result of, what Trump perceives to be insults about his war levelled by the German Chancellor.
Yeah, and the two stories are kind of connected, because it may be reflecting on the fact that the King might be the only person on the planet who can actually speak truth to power in the United States, in Washington, D.C., and not get berated by President Trump. Chancellor Merz was telling the truth in what he said in that appearance earlier in the week. Iran has and is humiliating the United States. The war was started without a plan. There is no strategy for ending it. But speaking the truth here is no longer acceptable conduct. So last night, the Pentagon, as you know, announced that it had completed a full review of its force posture in Europe, which seems extraordinarily unlikely, given that the move to pull these troops out was definitely not on the cards before Chancellor Merz enraged President Trump with those comments. I think,
and also they need those troops for their war in Iran, don't they? They need those forward positions at the Ramstein Air Base and all these other bases they've got, and the ones in Italy, in order to conduct the war they're conducting right now.
Well, which is why I think that this is a much lower number of troops that are going to be withdrawn over the next 12 months. It's not an immediate withdrawal than might have been feared. But remember, the president is also saying he's going to punish Italy and Spain, even Italy, led by his old mate, no longer a mate, Giorgia Meloni. Extraordinary. We're expecting similar announcements about troops based in Italy and Spain being withdrawn. But it's almost impossible now to deal with truth when you're talking to the Pentagon or when you're dealing with the White House. President Trump this week publicly insisted there are no shortages of munitions being created as a result of this ongoing war on Iran. And indeed, he's now told Congress the war is terminated. So he doesn't need to go and consult with them, because just in time for the 60-day window that was expiring last night, he says hostilities ended on April the 7th with the ceasefire. And what he's basically doing is a bit of fancy footwork so that if hostilities restart, he'll argue that the clock then has to reset back to day one.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
Might even change the name of the operation. Won't surprise me if Act 2 of the war in Iran is given a different name
Blind
than
Fury
Operation
rather than Epic Fury, for instance.
Yeah, I mean, change one word and it'll be a different military operation. He also argued yesterday that he considers the War Powers Resolution to be unconstitutional. But on the munitions shortage issue, he publicly denies there are any issues whatsoever that have been created as a result of the amount of weaponry that's been used to try and subdue the Iranians. And yet at the same time, the Pentagon is warning Europe that munitions deliveries to Europe to backfill the stuff that's been sent to Ukraine and other munitions that have been lined up, those are going to be delayed because there's a shortage of munitions. So, I mean, you can't believe anything that you actually hear.
Extraordinary. The other really important development is the Supreme Court ruling on the voting rights case. Tell us about that.
It's an absolutely massive development. I think the biggest story of the week in many ways. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 was the key piece of legislation pushed through by President Lyndon Johnson in the aftermath of the assassination of John F. Kennedy, that said to the American people, right, we now have to create full democracy by providing the vote to the black community, to other minority communities, and by creating, in places where those minorities live in the majority, constituencies, congressional districts that reflect their voting power in the areas where they live. And what the Supreme Court did this week was to say that bit of the Voting Rights Act is unconstitutional and was struck down. Which means that we are already seeing...
How did they justify that, by the way, in their majority opinion?
They called it racial gerrymandering. They argued that it was essentially racist to be creating constituencies in which majority black populations lived and reflective of the voting rights of majority black constituents. I mean, this is a move, of course, backed by the 6 Republican-appointed justices of the Supreme Court of the 9, delivers a massive win to President Trump and his fellow Republicans. And what we're seeing now is a scramble across the South. The governor of Louisiana, the state that brought the case in the first place, has already postponed primary elections that were due to take place in 2 weeks' time ahead of the midterms, so that Louisiana can redraw all of its congressional maps in a bid to make sure that Republican majorities exist in those congressional districts. We've heard leaders in Tennessee saying that they want to deliver the state's entire congressional delegation to Donald Trump and the Republicans. And even if this doesn't work entirely, it's setting a situation up in which President Trump, should he find himself losing the midterms in November, is going to be able to engage in protracted legal battles, challenging the outcome of the midterms in a whole variety of states based on this Supreme Court ruling. So we are in for all sorts of electoral shenanigans, which we already knew, but now supercharged by this Supreme Court decision.
And we know that other states, some states have looked at redrawing the district boundaries of constituencies in the last year. Can we now expect Democrat states like California, Illinois or New York to do the same thing to make sure that Democrats win in those constituencies?
Well, it is already happening. And to be fair, Democrats themselves have been no slouches when it comes to gerrymandering and redrawing constituency boundaries to try and game the system to their advantage. And if you look down in Virginia, just south of us here, there was a referendum, a ballot issue just within the last few weeks in which Virginia voters backed an idea pushed by the new Democratic governor of Virginia, Abigail Spanberger, to create 4 districts that absolutely are guaranteed, as guaranteed as they can be, to send Democrats to Congress. So this is now going to become the chaos theory of electoral boundary drawing and redrawing all over the country. But that actually, again, helps Donald Trump because it's going to create a situation where by the end of the year, once these midterm elections are over, if he hasn't won them, he is going to litigate for months the outcome of these elections all over the country, and it is going to get very messy, very ugly, and it's going to be a huge threat to the constitutional probity of this country.
Just finally, I mean, this is alarming stuff, and a lot of my American friends would agree with you entirely. Just finally, and very briefly, if the Democrats do end up sweeping the House, possibly even getting a majority in the Senate, how will that limit Trump's powers going forward?
Well, that will depend, of course, on an argument that the Democrats have to have with themselves, which is, are they going to try and impeach Donald Trump all over again? Are they going to drag all of his cabinet officials before them for questioning and threaten to impeach many of them too, including former cabinet officials like the ousted Attorney General Pam Bondi? There are voices in the party that are saying, we shouldn't do that. We need to start focusing on 2028. There are other voices in the party that say we've absolutely got to do it. But were they to win, Donald Trump, at the very least, would be a lame duck for the remaining 2 years of his presidency.
Simon Marks in Washington, as ever, thank you very much indeed.